My name is Milton Friedman. I'm an economist, but more importantly, I'm a defender of individual liberty. And in 1999, 10 years before the world had ever heard the word Bitcoin, I told you exactly what was coming. You see, most people think Bitcoin appeared out of nowhere in 2008. A mysterious paper by Satoshi Nakamoto, a revolutionary idea that nobody saw coming. That's not true. The principles behind Bitcoin, the economic necessity for a decentralized digital currency, the inevitable march toward electronic money that couldn't be controlled by governments. I explained all of that in detail 17 years before Bitcoin's first transaction. Here's what I said word for word in a 1999 interview. The one thing that's missing, but that will soon be developed, is a reliable e-cash, a method whereby on the internet you can transfer funds from A to B without A knowing B or B knowing A. The way in which I can take a $20 bill and hand it over to you, and there's no record of where it came from, and you may get that without knowing who I am. That kind of thing will develop on the internet. I wasn't guessing, I wasn't hoping, I was applying economic logic to observe a gap in the market that inevitably had to be filled. And today, as Bitcoin trades at tens of thousands of dollars and millions of people worldwide use cryptocurrencies, I want to show you exactly how I knew this was coming, and more importantly, what it teaches us about the future of money and freedom. Because this isn't just a story about one economist's lucky prediction. This is about understanding how free markets always find a way around government control. And if you understand this principle, really understand it, you'll be able to see the next financial revolution coming before anyone else. Let me start with a question that most people get backwards. Do you think the internet made digital currencies possible? Or did the demand for financial freedom make digital currencies inevitable? Think about that for a moment. Most people assume that technology creates economic opportunities. First comes the innovation, then people find uses for it. But that's not how economics works. That's not how human action works. In economics, causation runs the opposite direction. First comes human needs, human desires, human problems that need solving. Then, inevitably, people figure out ways to solve those problems. The market doesn't wait for permission. The market doesn't wait for governments to approve. The market simply finds a way. In 1999, I could see three massive problems with the existing monetary system. Three problems that created a market demand so powerful that someone, somewhere, would eventually figure out how to solve them. That's not prophecy. That's just economics. Problem number one, government monopoly on money creation. For most of human history, money was chosen by the market. Gold, silver, shells, cattle, whatever people voluntarily agreed had value became money. But in the 20th century, governments claimed a monopoly on money. They made it illegal for anyone else to issue currency. They forced everyone to use their paper money and accept whatever value the government said it had. Now you might say, well, what's wrong with that? Don't we need stable money? And that question reveals a fundamental misconception most people have about government money. Government money isn't stable. It's the opposite of stable. Since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the US dollar has lost over 96% of its purchasing power. 96%! A dollar today buys what 4 cents bought in 1913. And that's not an accident. That's not a side effect. That's the entire point. Governments inflate their currencies on purpose because inflation is taxation without legislation. When they print new money, they're taking purchasing power from everyone who holds dollars and transferring it to themselves. It's the most efficient tax collection system ever invented because most people don't even realize it's happening. By 1999, anyone paying attention could see that this system was becoming unsustainable. The internet was creating global markets where people could instantly compare prices across countries. They could see firsthand how their purchasing power was eroding. They could watch their savings lose value in real time. And in a free market, when there's a problem this big, someone always figures out a solution. Problem number 2, government control over transactions. Think about what happens every time you use traditional money. If you use cash, the transaction is private, but cash is becoming increasingly impractical for large amounts or long distances. If you use banks, credit cards, or electronic transfers, then the government can see every single transaction you make. They know who you paid, when you paid them, how much you paid. They can freeze your accounts. They can block transactions they don't like. They can essentially turn off your access to the monetary system if they decide you're doing something they disapprove of. Now, I understood in 1999 that this level of government surveillance and control was completely incompatible with a free society. Free people need private transactions. They need the ability to engage in voluntary exchange without getting permission from bureaucrats. When I said people needed to be able to transfer funds without A knowing B or B knowing A, I wasn't talking about criminal activity. I was talking about the basic privacy that makes commercial society possible. The same privacy you have when you hand someone a $20 bill. But the existing electronic payment systems couldn't provide that privacy because they all required intermediaries. Banks, credit card companies, payment processors, all of them kept records, all of them could be pressured by governments, and all of them charged fees for the privilege of monitoring your transactions. The market needed an electronic payment system that worked like cash, private, direct, and outside government control. Problem number 3, the monopolistic nature of banking intermediaries. Every electronic transaction in 1999 required going through a bank or payment processor. And what's true of all monopolies? They charge too much and provide too little service. Banks were charging enormous fees for international transfers. A simple wire transfer could cost $25 or more and take days to process. Credit card companies were taking 2 to 3% of every transaction. And all of these fees were essentially taxes on commerce, making trade more expensive and less efficient than it needed to be. But more importantly, these intermediaries had the power to decide which transactions they would allow. If you wanted to send money to certain countries, too bad. If you wanted to make certain types of purchases, too bad. If the intermediary decided your business wasn't profitable enough, they could close your account. This wasn't just an economic problem. This was a freedom problem. When private intermediaries have the power to control your access to money, they become agents of government control. They become part of the regulatory apparatus, whether they want to be or not. So, by 1999, the market was crying out for a payment system that could operate without government permission, provide privacy like physical cash, work across borders without intermediaries, keep transaction costs low, resist censorship and control. Now, I didn't know exactly how someone would solve these problems. I couldn't have predicted the specific cryptographic innovation that made Bitcoin possible. But I knew that someone would solve them because the market demand was so powerful. And that's the key insight most people miss. You don't need to understand the technical details to understand the economic necessity. You just need to understand human action and the power of free markets to solve problems. But here's where it gets really interesting. I also predicted something else about digital currency that most Bitcoin enthusiasts today don't want to acknowledge. I said that digital currency would, quote, make it even easier for people to use the internet. Of course, it has its negative side. It means that gangsters, the people who are engaged in illegal transactions, will also have an easier way to carry on their business. But I think that the tendency to make it harder to collect taxes will be a positive effect. Did you catch that last part? I said that making it harder for governments to collect taxes would be a positive effect. Most economists today, even ones who support Bitcoin, won't say that out loud. They're afraid of being accused of promoting tax evasion. But I wasn't promoting tax evasion. I was observing that when governments have unlimited access to tax revenue, they have unlimited ability to grow beyond their proper bounds. Government should be limited. Government should be constrained. And one of the most important constraints is limiting government's access to money. When people can easily hide their wealth from tax collectors, governments have to be more careful about how much they try to take and what they try to do with it. This is why I also supported the gold standard. This is why I argued for constitutional limits on government spending. This is why I advocated for negative income tax instead of welfare bureaucracies. All of these policies share the same goal: limit government power by limiting government access to money. Digital currency like Bitcoin serves the exact same function. It makes government financial control more difficult, which makes government overreach more difficult, which makes society more free. Now, let me address the obvious question. Was I right? Well, look around. Bitcoin has gone from an idea in a white paper to a trillion-dollar asset class. Thousands of other cryptocurrencies exist. Entire countries are adopting Bitcoin as legal tender. Central banks around the world are scrambling to create their own digital currencies because they're terrified of losing control. And yes, governments are finding it harder to collect taxes. The IRS has hired thousands of new agents specifically to track cryptocurrency transactions. They're requiring exchanges to report customer information. They're trying to regulate digital currencies out of existence in some countries. But here's the beautiful part, and this is exactly what I predicted would happen. The market is always one step ahead. New privacy coins are being developed. New decentralized exchanges are being created. New technologies like Lightning Network are making transactions even more difficult to track. It's the same pattern you see throughout history. Government tries to control something. The market finds a way around the controls. Government creates new controls. The market finds new ways around them. And each iteration makes the market more sophisticated and government control less effective. But I want to be clear about something important. When I predicted digital currency in 1999, I wasn't advocating for lawlessness. I wasn't suggesting people should break the law or avoid paying legitimate taxes. I was advocating for freedom. And sometimes, many times, freedom and law come into conflict. When they do, I believe free people have a moral obligation to choose freedom. Consider this. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt made it illegal for Americans to own gold. Was that law moral? Was it just? Did Americans have an obligation to turn in their gold to the government? Or did they have a right to protect their wealth from government confiscation? I believe they had not just a right, but a duty to resist. And I believe the same principle applies today to government attempts to control digital currency. When governments try to monitor every transaction they're violating the basic privacy that free commerce requires. When they try to prevent people from using alternative currencies, they're violating the fundamental right of voluntary exchange. When they try to tax away half or more of what people earn, they're violating the principle that individuals should control the fruits of their own labor. Digital currency like Bitcoin isn't just a financial innovation. It's a freedom innovation. It's giving people the tools to conduct their economic lives without asking permission from bureaucrats. And that's exactly what I hoped would happen when I made my prediction in 1999. Now let's talk about what this means for you today. Because understanding how I predicted Bitcoin isn't just about understanding the past. It's about understanding how to think like an economist so you can see the future coming before everyone else. The same logic that told me digital currency was inevitable can tell you what financial innovations are coming next. The same understanding of human action and market forces that predicted Bitcoin can predict the next major disruption in finance, technology, or any other area of the economy. Here's how you do it. You don't try to predict specific technologies. You don't try to guess which company will win or which product will succeed. Instead, you look for problems. You look for government interventions that are creating inefficiencies. You look for human needs that aren't being met by existing institutions. Then you ask yourself, what would a free market solution to this problem look like? How would voluntary exchange, competition, and individual choice solve this better than government control and bureaucratic management? And then you watch for signs that someone, somewhere, is working on exactly that kind of solution. Let me give you some examples of what I see coming next. First, education. Government schools are failing. They're expensive, inefficient, and getting worse every year, despite spending more money. Parents are demanding alternatives. Technology is making personalized education possible. Someone is going to figure out how to create a market-based education system that works better and costs less than government schools. I predicted this in the 1960s when I advocated for school vouchers. I'm still waiting for the market to fully embrace this solution, but I can see it starting to happen with homeschooling, online education, and charter schools. Second, healthcare. Government regulations have made healthcare incredibly expensive and inefficient. Direct primary care doctors are starting to offer services without insurance intermediaries. Telemedicine is making healthcare more accessible. Medical tourism is forcing price competition across borders. Someone is going to figure out how to create a truly free market healthcare system, and it's going to be dramatically better and cheaper than what we have now. Third, housing. Government zoning laws, building codes, and regulations have made housing artificially expensive in most major cities. But technology is making new forms of housing possible. Remote work is reducing the need to live in expensive urban areas. Someone is going to figure out how to build high-quality, affordable housing without navigating the regulatory maze that makes construction so expensive today. Do you see the pattern? In every case, government intervention has created problems. In every case, technology is creating new possibilities for market solutions. In every case, there's enormous profit potential for whoever figures out how to serve unmet human needs. This is exactly the same logic I used to predict Bitcoin. I saw the problems with government money and banking. I understood that technology was creating new possibilities. I knew that human beings would always prefer more freedom to less freedom if they had the choice. The specific form the solution took, cryptocurrency based on blockchain technology, I couldn't have predicted. But the fact that some kind of solution would emerge and that it would give people more control over their own money, that was inevitable. So here's my advice to you. Stop trying to predict the future. Start understanding the present. Look for the problems government is creating. Look for the human needs that aren't being met. Look for the places where voluntary exchange and individual choice could do better than bureaucratic control. And then position yourself to benefit when the market inevitably creates solutions to those problems. This might mean learning new skills. It might mean investing in companies that are working on market-based solutions. It might mean starting your own business to serve unmet needs. But whatever you do, bet on freedom. Bet on voluntary exchange. Bet on the power of individuals to solve problems better than governments can. Because that's not just good economics. That's how I predicted Bitcoin 17 years before it existed. And that's how you'll see the next financial revolution coming before everyone else. The choice, as always, is yours. You can wait for governments and bureaucrats to solve your problems for you, or you can take responsibility for your own financial future and bet on the power of free markets to create opportunities. I know which choice I made in 1999 when I predicted digital currency. I know which choice I made throughout my career as an economist. And I know which choice has consistently produced better outcomes for individuals and societies throughout human history. The question is, which choice will you make? Now let me leave you with 3 specific actions you can take right now to position yourself for the next financial revolution based on the same principles that allowed me to predict Bitcoin. First, study monetary history. Most people think money has always worked the way it works today. They assume government control of currency is natural and necessary. But for most of human history, money was chosen by the market, not imposed by governments. Gold became money because people voluntarily chose it. Bitcoin is becoming money for the same reason, because people are choosing it. Understanding this history will help you recognize when the current system is failing and when alternatives are emerging. Read about the gold standard. Study hyperinflations throughout history. Learn what happened when governments debased their currencies, because the patterns repeat, and the same forces that made digital currency inevitable are still operating today. Second, develop skills that government can't regulate away. I predicted that digital currency would make it harder for governments to collect taxes. But that's just one example of how technology is making government control less effective across all areas of life. Remote work is making geographic taxation more complicated. Digital goods are making trade barriers meaningless. Decentralized systems are making censorship more difficult. The same forces that created Bitcoin are creating opportunities in every industry. But to benefit from these opportunities, you need skills that create value in free markets. Learn to solve problems. Learn to create things people want. Learn to provide services that improve people's lives. Because in a free market, value creation is always rewarded, regardless of what governments try to do. Third, diversify your freedom. Don't put all your eggs in one government's basket. I didn't predict Bitcoin because I thought the US dollar would collapse tomorrow. I predicted it because I understood that no monopoly lasts forever, including government monopolies on money. The same principle applies to all aspects of your life. Don't depend entirely on one government for your legal protections. Don't keep all your assets in one currency. Don't limit yourself to opportunities in one country. The world is becoming more connected, and the people who understand this will have advantages that previous generations never had. This isn't about being unpatriotic. This is about being realistic. Governments rise and fall. Currencies come and go. Economic systems change. But human beings' desire for freedom, prosperity, and voluntary exchange is constant. The people who bet on that constant force, rather than on any particular government or system, are the ones who consistently come out ahead. And here's something most people don't understand. The same government officials who criticize Bitcoin and digital currency are often the biggest beneficiaries of the current system's problems. Inflation helps politicians by letting them spend money without directly raising taxes. Banking regulations help big banks by making it harder for competitors to enter the market. Currency controls help corrupt officials by making it easier to hide stolen wealth. When these officials attack Bitcoin, they're not protecting you. They're protecting their own power and privilege. They understand exactly what I understood in 1999, that digital currency threatens government control over money, which threatens government power over everything else. That's why my prediction wasn't just about technology or economics. It was about the eternal struggle between individual freedom and government control. And in that struggle, I'll always bet on freedom. Because throughout human history, the greatest advances in human welfare have come not from government programs or bureaucratic planning, but from free people solving problems through voluntary exchange. The printing press, the steam engine, the telephone, the computer, the internet, and yes, Bitcoin. None of these innovations waited for government permission. All of them faced government resistance, and all of them ultimately improved human life by giving individuals more power to control their own destinies. This is the real pattern you need to understand. This is the real wisdom that allowed me to predict Bitcoin 17 years before it happened. And this is the real principle that will help you see whatever comes next. Freedom works. Markets work. Individual choice works. Government control doesn't work, has never worked, and will never work, as well as voluntary cooperation between free people. That's not ideology. That's not politics. That's just economics. That's just human nature. That's just the way the world actually operates, whether politicians and bureaucrats want to admit it or not. So when you're trying to understand the future of money, the future of technology, or the future of anything else, don't ask what governments want to happen. Ask what free people, acting in their own interests, will choose when they have better options. And then position yourself to benefit when they make those choices. Because they will make those choices. They always have, they always will. The future belongs to those who understand that freedom isn't just a moral imperative, freedom is also the most powerful economic force in human history. And that force is just getting started. Think for yourself, choose for yourself, and prepare for a future where individual choice matters more than government control. That's the real lesson of how I predicted Bitcoin, and that's the real wisdom you need to understand the financial revolutions that are still coming.